time for our next fireside chat now. And this is about 5G and the rise of smart cities with Anastasia Karatrantou, Director of 5G and Edge at Capgemini. Hi Anastasia, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Nice to join you.
Yeah, lovely to see you again. Now, just to let you in on a little secret, we often do prep calls ahead of our sessions. When Anastasia and I caught up at the end of last week, I freely admit we spent at least half the time talking about our dogs, which we can't do today because we're talking about cloud and 5G live. So we'll move on to the matter at hand rather than our respective canine companions. So 5G and the rise of smart cities. Let's do a little bit of context first. Where do you feel we are now in this particular space?
That's a good question, and I think there are two ways to answer it. First of all, where are we in terms of smart services and smart capabilities for cities? And I think there is quite a lot of progress around the world, but we can also answer the question in correlation to 5G. Do we use 5G around the world to have smart cities? So first of all, I think we see one of the two examples in the market. First of all, more cohesive and fully fledged definitions of smart cities, where there is the use of IoT, advanced connectivity, smart services. But these, I would say, are either in POC stage, proof of concept and trial, to define the feasibility, not so technically, but more from a commercial aspect. Or we have seen the mature rollout of services and proper smart services, let's say, for citizens around the world, but not necessarily that encompass all the technologies that make up the smart city portfolio.
Because what you're alluding to there about how things are varying around the world, every city is different when it comes to implementing smart technologies within a city. What kind of local challenges are there? How do you see that playing out in terms of that variety and the varying situations around the world?
So I think, first of all, we have to look at Asia first, because it's truly impressive how things are adopted at scale within private organizations, but also within cities. And there are some examples like Singapore, for instance, where there is quite a mature definition of those things and people can enjoy the services. But then when we see Europe, I think we are more still defining what we can do, defining how we can work as an ecosystem. From a telecoms perspective, I think 5G is more widespread. The deployment of 5G is more widespread in Asia and the US, while in Europe, we still see that, for instance, most part of Eastern Europe still relies heavily on 4G. So how can we talk about smart cities when we are still using a previous generation of communications? And that brings me to the regulation, which is primarily what defines the pace at which those services are being rolled out. And in Europe, I think the regulation, it's quite protective of people for very good reasons, but this sometimes hinders the provision of smart services. Also, there are too many actors, and again, we need to come together as an ecosystem to innovate at scale, to roll out new services at scale. And there is, of course, a question of investments. Who invests more so we can, as citizens, enjoy those services? And here there are two key actors, the telcos and the governments. And I'm sure many people refer to this example, but in the US, we have like three major telco organizations, and in Europe, we have tens of them. And the geographical scale, if you take that into consideration, we understand that investments are more challenged.
Now, as the host, I'm allowed to do this. I'm going to put you on the spot for a second, if I can, Anastasia. From what you've seen, from your expertise, what's the closest you've seen to a truly smart city now?
Well, it might sound counterintuitive, but one of a really smart city I've seen, it's in Greece. And it was quite ahead of its time, provisioning services that were beneficial to the people, even 5G, quite ahead of its time. But I don't want to go to a niche example. I want to say that the Nordics, for instance, are quite mature in provisioning smart services in terms of traffic management that uses a lot of analytics and intelligence in how we monitor those things. But on a different subcomponent of smart cities, which is autonomous mobility, for instance, there is quite a lot of maturity in California and in the US. And that it's also because the geographic definition of the US makes it easier to have those things at scale, while autonomous mobility in open roads to traffic in Europe, as you can imagine, it's more challenging given the complexity of the roads, how old some cities are, and that they don't have architectural cohesion between them.
One thing I would like to dig into is some of the best examples and use cases you've seen, because as you're saying there, every city is different. You might have a medieval streetscape in a British town or city compared to sort of the wide open roads in Europe or in the US or Asia, where there's more 5G connectivity, for example. What are some of the best individual use cases you've seen?
Personally, I'm a big advocate of CV2X, what we call the communication standards for vehicle to everything. And I'm a big advocate because I think that provisioning those capabilities will effectively lead to less accidents happening and safer roads. So I think that is a key area where we need to focus. And it might not sound as fancy or niche, but I think it can have a great potential in societies. But also there is an element of keeping people happy and satisfied where they live. And we saw that with the pandemic, that some people opted to stay away from busy centers and go to more remote places. So if we want to trigger that interest for the places we live, then we might need to make the way we interact with the ecosystem more fun and more engaging. And I think one of the most challenging, and again, not necessarily most exciting use cases, is the availability of data, real-time information that accompanies a person throughout their daily lives as they step out of their house to go to the office, as they get their public transportation or private their car, and they need to park, and they need to know about the weather. So real-time information that comes with you throughout your journey in a day.
Now, one word I want to return to that you used earlier, where I want to really dig into this, is about the importance of the ecosystem. One big theme from the event so far today is how different areas of this ecosystem feed into each other, where it's 5G, cloud, AI. There's always an ecosystem where everything depends on each other. For you, the ecosystems you're talking about, who are the key actors, and how crucial is it that we've got this flow of new ideas and innovation to really push and continue progress?
So I'll try from, I think, the biggest participation in the end-to-end value chain. I hope I'll do justice to all of them. First of all, there is the governments, the authorities, the local authorities and the governments. And they have to create the space for collaboration. They have to take into consideration the demand. They have to prioritize what's good, what's safe, what will bring the best outcome for the citizens. Then I would say is the infrastructure providers. And there, I think the most important one is the telcos, the telecoms providers. And the burden for them is quite significant because they have to accommodate and provision this really expensive infrastructure that caters for critical services. We cannot forget that some of these services are really critical. And fund them. And sometimes the return of investment, it's not directly obvious. So there are a lot of things that need to be balanced there. So these are the most prominent actors. Then we go to the OEMs. And I said earlier, I do believe that CV2X and autonomous mobility is a very critical component of smart cities. So here we see the automakers that, again, have to come together and define a common way of communication in terms of technology and jointly decide how they will take this ahead in the roadmap. And that is very challenging as well, because these are private organizations with their innovation agenda, with their budgets, their target audience, and it's quite challenging, especially in a socioeconomic background of 2025, to bring them together. And again, there is a big ask for investment and collaboration. Then I would say there is a plethora of amazing companies that have made it really easy to provision really interesting and advanced use cases that can be materialized with 5G and based on the smart city concepts. And here we see actors that have AR, VR solutions or autonomous solutions, or things that leverage intelligence. And it's critical to work with these organizations that are defined and established in a way that can incubate innovation. But again, they need the support from bigger actors in the ecosystem so they can anticipate demand and build and tailor their products based on that. But I think and I don't want to be selfish, and I represent an engineering and services organization. I think it's very critical to also have these actors that understand the complexity of the technologies across the spectrum and across the value chain and can engineer the interfaces between them. For me, for instance, the world data model, like the data that represents the citizens, the pedestrians, the city itself, the various retailers, the restaurants, every actor that we see in a city environment, that's the most complex part. And we need someone that is not only specialized, but can comprehend the challenges and the peculiarities of data as they leave the generator and go to the consumer.
I'm going to get you a slightly impossible question now, and that is, where does the responsibility lie to try out a lot of this technology and push the progress? Is it with the local or regional governments? Is it with the tech solutions providers? Is it with the telcos? Where does the responsibility lie to really put these great ideas into practice in different locations? I'm sure the answer is going to be it falls on everybody, but I'll throw that to you anyway. Where do you feel that impetus and responsibility should lie?
I was planning to start by saying that I don't want to be generic by saying everyone, but at the end of the day, it's everyone. Let's call out some actors, though. I think here governments and authorities have to take the lead. I'll take a step back and say that I have been working on the 5G space since before 5G was available, and I saw it being defined, and I saw us creating the first demand, and I saw where it was natural for people to say, yes, that's an amazing use case, let's go for it. And it's the reality on the ground that for enterprise, it was always easier and more intuitive to see that value and that application environment. And this is why, because we live in an era where consumers are more difficult to be motivated to spend extra money for things they already consume and enjoy. It's easier for people to say, I'm happy with what I have. Why pay more for something I don't understand yet? So if we understand the technology as actors within the smart cities ecosystem, and we believe it has value in terms of well-being, safety, and sustainability, which I alluded and I didn't mention earlier, but it's one of the most important drivers, then governments have to take initiative and make it a little bit easier for all these underlying actors to invest their time, their services, their assets, and create a coherent ecosystem. But I don't want to shy away from the responsibility. I think everyone that is engaged in one part or another of the ecosystem has a role to play. And I will say that even in Capgemini, we are a services company. We work across the whole industrial spectrum. We do our part. We participate in trials where we see there is a great technological potential, and we can help move the market a little bit further to the right side. And we help also spread the word, share learnings from one trial to the other. And another way we can contribute is by bringing together actors. If you collaborate with two enterprises and you have built trust, then it's easier to create a forum where they can work together.
Well, let's keep spreading the good word on some of the particular projects that have been going on. One I wanted to particularly look at that we discussed very briefly the other day when we caught up was the 5G Open Road project in Paris, which I believe you said finished in December. Tell me more about that. What was the project? What benefits has it brought? What learnings have we got from it? Fill me in on all of that.
How much time do you have?
Well, I think we've got about 10 minutes, so it's entirely up to you.
So it was a project that I personally like and admire a lot, because It was a trial with autonomous mobility services in roads open to traffic, and from all places in the world, in Paris. Like, if you've driven around, you know how busy it is, and an old city with its complexities, right? So we worked together with a number of great partners there, CSPs, automotive OEMs, orchestrators, other service organizations, to test the viability and the feasibility of a few use cases. One of them was the autonomous delivery of goods between retailers and students in a university campus. We tried different types of 5G deployment to see, is it good performance? Is it safe in both ways? You know, the boring stuff, if technology works. And that was overwhelmingly positive, I think. To cover, though, the other side, the business, and that's very important, because otherwise we don't have motivation so that private organizations go and invest to build and manage the technology. That was more challenging. Again, we go back to what I was talking about, which is who is the owner of the benefit, who is supposed to pay for this new service. Are we asking the students to say, I'm getting autonomous delivered goods? I can fund this service myself. Probably that's counterintuitive. So who is the owner of the business case, and how can we make it flourish? The good thing and the good outcome of this is that the work is being continued. It will move in a different scope, so it's not a one-off. And I think that aligns very well with a bigger spirit that I observe in the media for Europe, to work together as an ecosystem and try to accelerate deployment of 5G infrastructure and all the great services it enables. And I feel really confident for 2025. I think we have been slow in Europe, but I see acceleration and I see actors coming together.
I think it would be something of a, it's fairly obvious, as I said earlier, about 5G being a foundational sector now for society. It is critical. How important for you, though, is it that we don't forget the importance of telcos in this particular discussion? They are critical.
They're fundamental, and I think the last few years where we saw the advent of private 5G, a lot of actors appeared in the ecosystem, and a telecoms product and concept appeared to be something that other types of organizations can offer. And I say that the role of a telco is crucial to proper communication in the world. And I think we have to acknowledge all the challenges they are going and the big transformation that possibly will bring them benefits. I think for smart cities, it's one of the most critical and fundamental parts of the equation. In order to materialize and enjoy at scale those services, we need a good, powerful 5G network that has great coverage and penetration within countries, and also interoperability when we go from one country to the other. So for me, it's one of the most important actors that contributes significantly to the success of the concept.
And one final question, if I can, Anastasia, and that's just about the future. For you, where do things go next? Progress feels like it's accelerating with all of the good use cases being shared. For you, what comes next over the coming few years? How much do you feel the progress is going to continue to accelerate?
I think, first of all, to talk a little bit about the technology itself, we have now the ability to deliver IoT services with 5G RedCap on the 5G network. So I'm really interested, and I'm staying tuned to see how this is going to be implemented amongst different sectors, including the one in question today. I think 5G has reached such a good level of maturity that we will see trials growing. We'll see, I don't think so many POCs anymore. It's a word that we want to avoid collectively as an ecosystem. And I do hope that we will see also some acceleration in terms of autonomous mobility within some major European countries. In the US, they have already taken key decisions to enable the ecosystem towards CV2X, and the same in Asia. So I think more accelerated adoption, and not POCs, but more trials with KPIs and feedback for continuation.
Well, as you say, it's exciting time, more continued adoption, and I'm sure if we did this conversation again in a year's time, there'll be so many more fantastic examples to dig into. But I'm afraid we're out of time now. Anastasia, thank you so much for joining us here at Cloud and 5G Live. Really enjoyed your company today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Have a good day.
Absolutely. You too.